The morning began like every other day, with the smell of freshly baked bread curling through the air, sweet and warm like comfort itself. I had been awake since before dawn, my hands deep in dough, shaping the loaves that had kept our small family bakery alive for years. The sun hadn't yet stretched over the roofs of the village, but the ovens were already roaring, the fire crackling like an old friend whispering secrets. I loved that sound. It meant life, rhythm, and purpose. As I sprinkled flour over the counter, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. My heart leapt. Customers this early, but when I turned, it wasn't a customer. It was my parents. And my brother. The way they stood, lined up like a storm waiting to strike, told me something wasn't right. My mother's eyes were lowered, my father's face was hard, and my brother, he wore that familiar smirk that always carried more pride than kindness. "Come here," my father said. His voice was heavy, formal. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped closer, my stomach tightening. In his hand was a folder, the kind you only see when something serious is about to happen, papers, signatures, things that change the air in the room. "I wanted to tell you this together," he began. "From today, the bakery will officially belong to your brother." For a second, I didn't understand. The words floated in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to smile, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. But no one did. My mother looked away. My brother's smirk deepened. My father sighed. "He'll be taking over management and ownership. The documents are signed. It's better this way for the family." Better for the family. My heart thudded against my ribs. The apron around my waist suddenly felt like a chain. I had worked every day since I was 16, opening the bakery before sunrise, closing it long after everyone else had gone home. I had created the recipes, built the customer base, turned a struggling shop into a heartbeat of the neighborhood. And now, with a few signatures, it was gone. "You can still work here," my father said quietly. "You'll always have a place. Work here." Under him, I looked at my brother. His smile said everything. He'd wanted this for years. The bakery wasn't just a building to him. It was proof of victory, a trophy. My throat tightened, and I could taste the salt of tears I refused to let fall. The oven timer rang a sharp ding, cutting through the silence. I turned to pull out the loaves, golden and perfect, but I couldn't bring myself to touch them. They weren't mine anymore. Nothing here was. Slowly, I untied my apron. My fingers trembled, but my heart grew steady. I placed it on the counter, next to the steaming bread, and looked at the faces I had once trusted. "Congratulations," I said softly. "You've finally given him everything he wanted." Then I walked out. The morning air hit me like a slap. Cold, clean, real. Behind me, the bakery door creaked shut. The smell of bread still followed me down the street, mocking and sweet. I didn't look back. I couldn't. They thought I was leaving behind the bakery, but in truth, I was walking toward something greater, something I didn't yet understand. Long before that day of betrayal, the bakery had been more than just a shop. It was the heart of our family, the rhythm of our lives. I could still remember being a child, standing on a wooden stool beside my father as he taught me how to knead dough. He used to say, "Bread is like life, you must press it with love, wait with patience, and trust it to rise." I believed him then. Those lessons shaped me, not just as a baker, but as a person who found peace in creation. The bakery wasn't always big. It started as a small clay-walled shop, with one old oven and a single wooden shelf. In those early years, customers came out of kindness more than hunger. My mother would smile and say, "They don't buy bread, they buy hope." Slowly, the smell of our bread began to draw more people: school children who spent their coins on sweet rolls, workers who carried loaves home to their families, elders who came just to talk and share stories. As we grew, so did our family roles. My father handled finances, my mother managed customers, and we children helped where we could. But I was different. I didn't just help, I lived for that bakery. I would stay up late experimenting, mixing new ingredients, dreaming of creating something that carried our family's name across the country. My brother, on the other hand, was the charming one, easy with words, quick with laughter, the type who never stayed long enough to clean the counters, but always got praised for greeting customers. It was strange how the balance shifted over the years. Whenever I came up with a new recipe, my parents would nod politely, almost dismissive. But when my brother mentioned an idea, even one he heard from someone else, it was celebrated. I told myself it didn't matter. I was doing it for the family, not the fame. But deep down, a small part of me wanted to be seen, to be valued for what I brought to the table. The village had its own traditions too. In our culture, the eldest son often inherits the family business. It's seen as honor and duty, a way to keep the bloodline strong. But I thought our parents were different, that they would see beyond tradition and recognize hard work over hierarchy. That belief kept me going, pushing through exhaustion, through long nights and early mornings, through the ache in my back and the blisters on my palms. I should have noticed the signs. The new signboard, outside it had my brother's name printed larger than mine. The meetings I wasn't invited to. The way my father avoided my eyes when I asked about future plans. Even the new accountant, who started calling my brother boss. I ignored it all. I told myself, they're just preparing for when I take over. Looking back, it was foolish hope. I mistook silence for fairness and love for loyalty. On the night before everything changed, I had stayed in the bakery long after everyone went home. I sat near the oven, watching the last batch of loaves rise, the glow of the fire reflecting on my hands. I remember whispering to myself, this is mine. I built this, but I was wrong. That bakery might have been built by my hands, but the power was never mine. It belonged to names written on papers, two traditions older than truth, two hearts that favored pride over passion. And I was just the worker who loved too deeply to see betrayal coming. The morning of the betrayal replayed in my mind. Like a haunting melody I couldn't silence. I had left the bakery behind me, but my heart was still beating inside that room, trapped under the weight of betrayal. For hours, I wandered aimlessly through the narrow village streets. Dust clinging to my shoes, my mind spinning like the blades of an old fan. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I finally stopped, it wasn't because I was tired, it was because I couldn't breathe. I sat down on a bench outside a small shop and stared at my flour-stained hands. Those hands had built everything. They had shaped loaves, scrubbed ovens, and comforted crying customers. Now, they were empty. I thought about going back. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe they would apologize. But I knew better. My father's words were carved in stone. You'll always have a place here. He meant a place below, not beside. They didn't see me as the builder, only as the helper. My chest burned at the thought. Hours passed before I realized how far I had walked. The village sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that mocked me, gold and crimson, the same shades as baked bread. I passed by people who waved and smiled, unaware that my entire world had just crumbled. I smiled back weakly, not wanting them to see my storm. That night, I went home, not to my parents' house, but to the small room I rented behind the bakery. My brother's laughter echoed from the front. They were celebrating. I could hear glasses clinking, music playing, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor. I stood in the darkness, listening to their joy. Each laugh felt like a nail in my chest. Inside my room, everything was quiet. I looked around at the few things I owned, a small mattress, a cracked mirror, and a wooden table covered with flour dust. On the table lay my baking notebook, filled with recipes, notes, dreams. I ran my hand over its cover, tracing the marks of time and hard work. That book was all I had left. Then came the moment, the breaking point. I stood up, took off my apron, still hanging by the door, stiff with dry dough, and folded it neatly. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. I placed it on the bed, as if laying down a piece of myself. Outside, the night wind carried the scent of bread, my bread. The smell that once comforted me now burned like smoke. I stepped out, not knowing where I was going. The road was dark, the village quiet, and for the first time in my life, I had no plan. But there was a strange calm in that uncertainty. I whispered to myself, if they can take the bakery, let them, but they can't take what I've learned. As I walked past the empty fields, the moon followed me, pale and distant, like a witness to my pain. I didn't cry, not a single tear. I'd given enough of myself to that family. At the corner of the street, I stopped one last time, and looked back. The bakery's faint light flickered through the windows. I could almost see my younger self inside, hopeful, loyal, blind. I'm done, I said to the wind. And I meant it. They thought I had walked away in defeat, but the truth, I was just walking into the fire that would forge me. The first night away from the bakery was the longest of my life. I slept beneath an old shed at the edge of the market, the smell of dust and smoke mixing with the cold air. The stars above me blinked faintly, as if unsure whether to watch or turn away. I had no home, no job, and no plan, only the ache of betrayal. And a notebook filled with recipes that suddenly felt like fragments of another life. When morning came, I woke to the chatter of traders setting up their stalls, the sound of laughter, the creak of wooden carts, the smell of roasted maize. The world kept moving, even though mine had stopped. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since yesterday. I reached into my pocket, only a few crumpled notes remained. Just enough to buy flour and a handful of yeast. I found a small shack near the end of the market. It was half broken, with a leaking roof and a door that refused to stay shut. The owner, an old man with tired eyes, looked at me skeptically when I asked to rent it. "You want this place? It's falling apart," he said. I smiled faintly. "So am I. Maybe we'll hold each other together." He laughed, coughed, then nodded. 2 coins a day. If you can keep up. That's how it began, my second life, built from the ashes of the first. I cleaned the shack for hours, sweeping away dust, fixing holes with old cloth, and patching cracks with mud. When the sun began to sink, I placed a small charcoal stove in the corner, set my pan on top, and started mixing flour with trembling hands. The first loaf I baked burned. The second was half-cooked. By the third, I was too tired to care. My arms ached, my head spun, and the tears I had held back since the betrayal finally fell, not soft, but hard, like stones breaking the silence. The next morning, I tried again. This time, I baked slowly, carefully, whispering the same words my father once told me. Press with love, wait with patience, trust it to rise. When the bread finally came out, it wasn't perfect, but it smelled like hope, faint but real. I sat outside the shack, holding the loaf, unsure what to do next. Then I saw her, an elderly woman walking with a basket of vegetables. Her clothes were simple, her steps slow but strong. She stopped and looked at me. "You selling that bread, child?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, though it's not much." She took a piece, chewed slowly, and smiled. "It tastes like truth," she said softly. "It's rough, but it's real. Keep baking." That moment changed everything. She didn't know it, but her words were like fire to my cold heart. For the first time since I walked out, I felt something rise inside me again, not anger, not sadness, but a quiet strength. That night, I baked more loaves, not for my parents, not for approval, but for myself, for the child who stood on a stool years ago dreaming of bread that could change lives. I had nothing, no bakery, no name, no help, but I had fire, flour, and faith. And sometimes, that's all you need to start again. Days turned into weeks. And slowly the smell of my bread began to weave its way through the market streets. At first, people came out of curiosity. The scent of warm loaves drifting from that broken shack caught attention even before sunrise. Some laughed at the sight of me covered in flour, my face streaked with sweat and soot. "The baker who lost everything," they whispered. But I didn't care. I was baking again, and that was enough. My first few customers were children. They didn't care about perfection. They cared about sweetness. I began making small cassava buns, soft on the inside and crusty on the outside, sprinkled with sugar. They sold out before noon. I reinvested every coin I earned, bought more flour, more charcoal, a second-hand wooden table. The shack started to look like a bakery again, though far from the one I left behind. Each loaf carried a story. When I mixed the dough, I thought of every insult, every betrayal, every long night in my parents' bakery when I was invisible. I pressed my pain into the dough until it became something else, something that healed. Every time someone smiled after tasting my bread, it was like stitching a small piece of my broken heart back together. Then came the day that changed everything. A middle-aged woman came by with tired eyes and a heavy sigh. She asked softly, "Do you have anything left, child?" "I haven't eaten since morning." I gave her the last loaf I had, still warm, and told her to pay when she could. She took a bite, and tears filled her eyes. This tastes like home," she whispered. By evening, she returned with 3 of her friends. "We told them about you," she said proudly. "They want to taste your bread too." Soon, my little shack was surrounded by people, workers, mothers, travelers, even a few children tugging at their mothers' wrappers, asking for the soft bread. I began experimenting again. Coconut rolls, plantain loabis, sweet corn pastries. Each recipe carried a part of our culture, a taste of Africa's heart. The smell spread far beyond the market. People began saying, "There's a baker whose bread speaks to the soul." One day, as I was preparing dough, the old woman who had first tasted my bread returned. She watched me work for a while before speaking. "You bake with your spirit," she said. "That's rare. Don't stop." I smiled shyly. "I bake because I must. It's all I know." She shook her head. "No, child. You bake because you were chosen to feed hearts, not just bellies." Her words stayed with me. From that moment, I began to see my work differently. I wasn't just rebuilding a business, I was rebuilding myself one loaf at a time. Within months, People started calling my place the healing oven. There were days I sold out before the sun rose. Children laughed, old men told stories, and the air around my shop carried joy. For the first time in my life, I didn't need my family's name. I had made my own. And yet, deep inside, I knew this peace wouldn't last forever, because when something rises too high, shadows from the past always come looking for it. The day my brother returned was hot and dry, the kind of day where the dust sticks to your skin, and even the wind seems to hold its breath. I was behind my stall, arranging loaves for the morning rush, when I saw a familiar figure standing at the far end of the market. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but no, it was him, dressed in polished shoes, clean shirt, and arrogance that hadn't aged a day. He looked around, clearly uncomfortable in the noisy market, his eyes scanning until they locked on me. Our gazes met for the first time since that morning I had walked out of the family bakery. My heart thudded once, hard. I told myself to stay calm. I had no reason to fear him anymore. He approached slowly, pretending to smile, but his voice carried the same old edge. "So, it's true," he said, glancing at my setup. "You really opened a, what should I call it? A stall?" I wiped my hands on my apron and met his gaze. "Call it whatever you want. The people call it the healing oven." His smirk faltered. I could see it, that flicker of surprise he tried to hide. "You're getting popular," he said carefully. "Even our customers are talking about you. Some of them stopped coming to the bakery. Father's not pleased." I raised an eyebrow. Maybe he should have kept his best baker. His face tightened. "You think you're better than us now? After everything our parents did for you?" I laughed softly, not out of mockery but out of disbelief. "Everything they did for me. They took what I built and handed it to you like a birthday gift." His eyes darkened. "Watch your words. You wouldn't have a name if not for that bakery." That was it, the spark that lit the fire. I stepped closer, my voice steady but sharp. "No, I wouldn't have a name if I'd stayed there, but out here, I earned one. Every loaf, every scar, every sleepless night, they're mine." A small crowd had gathered around us. People whispered, recognizing us both. I could see the pride on some faces, the curiosity on others. My brother noticed it too, his jaw clenched, his pride wounded. He leaned closer and hissed, "You'll regret this. You think you can outshine us? You stole our recipes." I didn't flinch. "You can steal my family, my shop, even my oven," I said quietly, "but you can't steal my hands. You can't steal my heart." The crowd murmured in approval. He stepped back, his confidence cracking. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not of me, but of what I represented. Freedom. Authenticity. He turned to leave, muttering something under his breath. But before he walked away completely, he glanced back and said, "This isn't over." I watched him go, the tension fading with each step he took. The market slowly returned to life. Customers calling, children laughing, the smell of bread thick in the air. Inside, though, I felt a new energy, a storm brewing, a battle I didn't ask for but would no longer avoid. I looked down at the loaves cooling beside me and whispered, "Let him come. I've fought the fire before." And I meant it, because this time, I wasn't needing dough to survive, I was needing to win. The months that followed were a blur of work, sweat, and whispers. News of the confrontation between me and my brother spread through the town like wildfire. Some said I was brave, others said I had disrespected my family, but no matter what they said, one truth remained. The healing oven had become a household name. People came from neighboring villages just to taste the bread that carried stories in every bite. Then one afternoon, a messenger arrived at my stall with a letter. It bore the seal of the National Baking Festival, the biggest event in the country. Bakers from every region competed for the title of Master Baker. And the winner would gain national recognition and business funding. My hands trembled as I read the invitation. Someone had nominated me. I didn't know who, but it felt like fate. Excitement burned through me like fire, but beneath it was fear. The last time I competed for something, I had lost everything. Still, I knew this was my chance to prove not to my family, not even to my brother, but to myself that I was worthy of the dream I once built. I worked tirelessly. Nights blurred into mornings. I experimented with new recipes, mixing heritage and innovation. Sweet potato bread with coconut glaze, spiced millet rolls, and honey plantain loaves. I wanted to bring the taste of home to the world stage. The people of the market supported me. They offered to help, to taste test, to cheer. My small bakery had become a family I had chosen. But destiny, as always, had its own timing. 2 days before the festival, disaster struck. I woke to smoke thick in the air. The shack, my beloved bakery, was on fire. Flames licked the roof, devouring the shelves, the oven, everything I had built. I screamed, running toward it, but the heat pushed me back. Neighbors rushed to help, forming a chain with buckets of water, but it was too late. The oven collapsed, the bread turned to ash, and the signboard bearing the healing oven cracked in two. When the flames finally died, I stood in the rubble, the air heavy with the smell of burnt dreams. My brother's face flashed in my mind, that smirk, that warning. This isn't over. I didn't need proof. I knew he had a hand in this, but I had no time to fight him. The festival was tomorrow. For the first time in months, doubt crept back into my heart. Maybe I wasn't meant to rise after all. Maybe life was just reminding me of my place. I sat in the ashes, head bowed, when I felt a soft hand on my shoulder. It was the old woman, the one who'd told me my bread tasted like truth. She looked around at the wreckage, then at me. "You can rebuild walls," she said quietly, "but can you still bake when all you have left is your heart?" Her words pierced me deeper than the fire ever could. I closed my eyes, breathed the smoky air, and whispered, "Yes, I can." By dawn, the entire market gathered to help. They brought ingredients, pots, stoves, anything they could spare. Children fetched water, mothers kneaded dough, and men built a makeshift oven from stones and clay. That morning, as the sun rose over the ruins, I stood with flour on my hands again. My bakery was gone, but my spirit had never been more alive. I was ready for the festival, not to prove a point but to rise, one last time. The morning of the festival shimmered with heat and noise. The capital city was alive. Banners fluttered, drums echoed, and the smell of 100 ovens filled the air. Bakers from across the nation had gathered, each one wearing crisp uniforms, surrounded by assistants, polished counters, and shining equipment. And then there was me, standing alone with a borrowed apron, a basket of flour, and eyes still stinging from the smoke of yesterday's fire. People stared as I entered the arena. Some recognized me from the market stories, others whispered, "That's the baker whose shop burned down." My brother was already there, dressed in spotless white, his station gleaming like silver. He turned when he saw me, a faint, mocking smile curving on his lips. "You actually came," he said, laughing under his breath. "I thought the fire would have finished your spirit." I met his gaze calmly. "It only burned the walls," I said, "not the fire inside me." The whistle blew. The competition began. Each baker had 4 hours to create something that represented their identity, their story through bread. I closed my eyes and remembered every moment that had brought me here. The betrayal, the hunger, the pain, the kindness of strangers, the laughter of the market children, the words of the old woman. And then I began. Flour and water, sugar and salt, fire and faith. My hands moved like they had a memory of their own. I mixed, folded, and shaped with precision and soul. The judges walked around, inspecting. One paused near me, watching quietly. I didn't speak. I let my bread do the talking. My brother worked beside me, confident as ever. He was making the same bread our father had taught us years ago, the family recipe, but mine was different. I was making the rising loaf, a bread born from ashes and love, flavored with honey and coconut, shaped like a sunrise. Every stroke, every cut in the dough carried a memory, pain turned into purpose. When the time was up, the air filled with the scent of fresh bread. The judges moved from table to table, tasting, murmuring, taking notes. When they reached mine, one of them smiled after the first bite. "This tastes alive," he said softly. Then they reached my brother's table. His bread was perfect, golden, uniform safe. But when they tasted it, they only nodded politely. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the head judge stepped forward, holding the microphone. The crowd went silent. "The winner," he announced, "is the baker whose bread carried not just flavor, but heart, the one who baked with soul." My breath caught. "The rising loaf," by the healing oven. The crowd erupted. Cheers, drums, laughter. It was like the sound of destiny breaking open. Tears filled my eyes as people lifted me onto their shoulders, chanting my name. Across the stage, I saw my brother standing still, eyes lowered, pride melting into shame. Later, as the crowd dispersed, he approached me. His voice trembled. "You did it," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "The fire," I stopped him gently. "You don't need to explain. You took my oven, but you lit my fire. Without you, I wouldn't be here." He nodded, eyes wet. "Can we start over?" I smiled. "We already have." Weeks later, I opened a new bakery in the heart of the city. I named it the Rising Loaf. People came from miles away, not just for the bread, but for the story behind it, and every morning, as I lit the oven, I whispered to myself, sometimes life burns your bakery to the ground, not to destroy you, but to teach you how to bake your own destiny.